Welcome to today's program, which features an extraordinary story, that of Ashley Smith, who was kidnapped and taken hostage by courthouse killer Brian Nichols.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Ashley, tell us a little bit about your life. You'd had a pretty terrible life up to that day when you were kidnapped. Just give us a little pocket picture of what your life was like. I understand you lost your husband.
Yes, well, I actually was raised in a Christian home and had a really good life up until about 18 or 19, and then I started making some bad choices, and then I got married young, and after about 2.5 years of marriage, my husband was brutally murdered in front of me, was stabbed to death, and he died in my arms. And so after that, I didn't deal with his death in a very positive manner. Of course, you can imagine many emotions flooded me from anger and fear, sadness, and instead of really facing the reality of those, I just covered them up with drugs. So when Brian Nichols came into my life, I was in the middle of a spiritual warfare, trying to go back and forth between God and drugs, or God and the world, and was failing miserably.
Your husband, was he killed in a chance way, or was it involved with some sort of criminal activity that he got in the middle of, or what?
Well, he just got into a fight with a couple of different people. They were actually old friends of his, and they were saying things about him that he didn't like, and so he started a fight with them, and it was two of them, him and a friend, and then about 5 or 6 of them. So ultimately, he lost that fight.
So what started you on meth?
After my husband was killed, I dove pretty heavy into any drug I could get my hands on. And in 2001, one of my friends came over, and she was so skinny and she was so full of energy, and I had always been opposed to doing it for, up until that point, because I knew it was a very, very bad drug. But when she came over and seemed like she was having a good time on it and looked fabulous, I just tried it. And, as soon as I tried it, it was February of 2003, it grabbed hold of me and it didn't let go.
What exactly does meth do? Is it like it gives you amazing energy, or what?
Well, for most people, yes, it does. It gives you energy. It kind of speeds you up. It's kind of an equivalent to cocaine. It's definitely a speed. But that's what it did for me. It had me cleaning my house and, getting all kinds of work done at first. Now, that's what it did to me at first. But as it began to take over my life, it didn't do anything but take my sanity from me, and it began to have negative effects on my life.
So in those days, Ashley, how did you pay for the drugs?
Most of the time I dated the drug dealer, so most of the time I didn't really have to pay for it. It was just my boyfriend, and he was selling it to other people.
So take us back to that day, that night when this all began. I understand you'd gone out to get a packet of cigarettes.
Yes. Actually that day, Brian Nichols killed and escaped from the courthouse and killed the 3 people around 9 o'clock that morning. And my stepfather had called me around noon or a little after, and he said, "There's a man that's escaped from the courthouse. He's on the loose, and I want you to be careful." And I really didn't think twice about it, because the courthouse was 45 miles away. I thought they would definitely catch the guy by then. But the night went on, and they still hadn't caught him at 9, 10 o'clock. And so I was in the middle of moving into a new apartment, and actually was unpacking some things. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, right before I was about to go to bed, I went out for cigarettes, and I noticed a truck pulling up, but didn't think twice about it at first. I thought he was a neighbor. But when I came back about 5 minutes later, I noticed that the man was still sitting in the truck. And so I got out of my car, and I began to walk towards my front door. And when I got out, he got out, and he began to follow me closer and closer to my door. And when I unlocked the door and turned around, he was right there with a gun pointed right at me.
Can you describe what he looked like? Was he a big guy or what?
You know, to me, he looked like he was about 6'5" and 400 pounds, when in reality he was about 6'2", maybe 210, 220, which is still a big guy. But he was very scary more than anything because he had these guns pointed at me.
And what did he say to you? I mean, when you turned around and you saw him, what did he say?
Well, of course, I immediately, naturally started to scream and ask him not to hurt me. And he told me to shut up, and if I shut up, he wouldn't hurt me, what I tried to do.
So he sort of pushed you in the house, and then how on earth did you, keep control? I mean, here you are, you've had a drug problem, you know, you're probably coming down a bit, and suddenly you've got this man in your house. To start with, was he very aggressive?
Yeah, he was. I actually hadn't done drugs. I had done drugs the day before, and he was very, of course, angry, forceful at first. But you know, when he said, "If you do everything I say, I won't hurt you," that was all I could think of was maybe if I just do what he says, he won't hurt me.
Did you have a child in the house as well?
My daughter Paige was not in the home at the time. She actually lived with my aunt. I had lost custody of her because of my drug addiction, and so she was not there at the time. But there were tons of pictures of her up everywhere, and of course I talked about her the whole night.
Did he share with you that he'd just become a father?
Well, I asked him to try to, when I was trying to find similarities between the two of us to try to get him to let me go, I asked him if he had any children, and he did tell me that he had just had a son a couple of days before this happened. So
as the time went along, he obviously needed something to control him, and I understand he asked you for some drugs, and
he actually asked me if I had any marijuana in the house, and I did not, but I had some meth that I told you I used it the day before, and it was in a place in my home that if he were to ransack my house, he would find it, and then I didn't want to make him upset with me for lying, so when he asked for the drugs, I told him that I had the meth, and he actually asked me 3 different times if I wanted to use it with him. Why didn't I use it with him? How about we do this together, is what he said. And I really believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jesus took the body of Brian Nichols right then and there. And Jesus was asking me, Ashley, do you want a new life? Because if you do, then you don't do those drugs. But if you want to continue living the life that you have been, go ahead and do those drugs, and I'm just going to take you home. It was very clear to me that God was asking me a life-changing decision, and I chose not to do the drugs.
Ashley, was he mad with you when you wouldn't join in?
No, I mean, he wasn't. He didn't seem mad at me. As a matter of fact, I told him that those drugs had ruined my life and that I didn't want anything else to do with them. And he kind of left it at that. There were 3 lines on the table to do, and he did 2 of them and left 1 there, and it stayed there all night.
How did he change after he'd taken the drugs?
I don't know necessarily that he changed so much, but I guess he did. He calmed down quite a bit. I don't know if that was a result of doing the drugs or not, but he turned from this angry, almost scared person to a person that was somewhat calm. He sat down on the couch and turned on the TV and watched a little bit of TV. And did he see himself on the television at all? Yes, he did. He saw himself on TV.
What was his response?
He kind of reacted a little bit to that simply because the news was not reporting the correct information. He was mad because the news said that he had shot Cynthia Hall, who was the deputy that was escorting him into the courthouse that day. But he said that he had just hit her over the head with a gun, and then he looked up at the ceiling or sky, whatever, and he said, "God, please let her live."
So now you start to read to him from The Purpose-Driven Life. What were you doing with a copy of that book?
Well, I had been, like I said earlier, fighting a spiritual warfare, and I, was raised in the church. I knew I knew what was going to help me was getting back with God. I just was having a very difficult time finding my way. So I had gotten the Purpose-Driven Life a few weeks before that when I had gone home to visit with my daughter, Paige. And I picked the book up there and started to read it on February 7th of 2005. And I read it one chapter every day the way that it was supposed to be read. And that, that was why I had the book.
So why did he ask you what's that book, or did you suddenly open it and say, let me read this to you?
Well, after I chose not to do the drugs, I felt a pretty intense need to back up that decision with Bible verses or prayer or something affiliated with God. And so I spotted my Purpose-Driven Life over in the corner, and I asked Brian Nichols if I could read. And he, in fact, said that was okay if I read it out loud to him.
So what was his response?
We talked a little bit about what our purpose was, and he said, because that's kind of what the chapter was about, and he said, what do you think my purpose is? And I said, well, you have to turn yourself in. You have to pay for what you did. And I said, people in prison need Jesus too. Maybe that's what you're supposed to do with the rest of your life. And then he, in turn, said pretty much the same thing to me. I think your purpose is to share God with other people and help them, tell them your story of how God's changed your life.
This must have been a surreal situation, Ashley, because here you are, you've gone out to get a packet of cigarettes, and before you know it, you've got a murderer in your home. He's doing drugs, and you're reading a Christian book to him. You almost couldn't.
It's pretty surreal.
You couldn't
look back on it now.
Yeah. So, how far into the kidnapping did you start reading the book?
I would say within about the first 2 hours of being held hostage.
When this was going on, did you start to think you're still going to lose your life, or was there a point when
never was secure in the fact that I was going to live until I got in the car and drove around the corner the next morning?
So that must have been the longest night of your life then.
Yeah, it was a very long night, but gratefully, it ended in a positive way for me.
So as the night goes on, is he starting to get tired and wants to lie down, or what?
No, he never got tired. He sat on the bed. He sat on the couch most of the whole time.
So what was the turning point? How was it you managed to escape, as it were?
I didn't really have to escape. He just let me leave the next morning. Pretty much the whole night I had been asking him, or furthermore telling him that I was supposed to have a meeting with my daughter that evening, the next morning, and ask him if I was going to be able to leave to go see her. And at first he told me that I wasn't going to be able to go, but as the night went on, he, I guess, warmed up to the fact that I kept telling him, imagine how she's going to feel. People are going to know that something's wrong because I don't ever miss a meeting with her. And if I don't show up, then people are going to start asking questions and wondering why I'm not there. So about 9 o'clock the next morning, he just said, when do you need to leave to see Paige? And I said, now sounds like a real good time. And he just let me walk out the door. And he asked me if there was anything that I could do or he could do for me while he was gone.
So he was hoping you wouldn't call the police, was he, or what?
I don't know what he was thinking. You would have to ask him that. But part of me thinks that he thought I was possibly going to come back after I visited with Paige. But part of me also knows, by conversations that we had, that he knew that I was going to call the police and turn him in. So,
Ashley, as you walked through the door, did you issue a prayer?
After I left my apartment, I, asked God to please not let anyone else get hurt, and basically just said thank you for letting me live and make it out of there alive.
So did you then call 911?
I did call 911 once I got in the car and rounded the corner.
You wrote a memoir about it.
Yes.
And the film's come out.
Uh-huh.
What did you think of the film?
The film could not have been any better than the way it is. It very much tells the true story. They did a phenomenal job. Kate did a phenomenal job in playing me. David did a fantastic job in capturing who Brian Nichols was, even though he had very limited contact with him. And I kind of give that all to the glory of God that he was able to capture that person.
And why do you think God spared your life, Ashley?
I really believe that God spared my life because he wanted me to go around the world and tell people that he changed me. You know, I didn't do anything in my apartment that night but lay down my brokenness to God, and he's brought me to a very different place in my life for the last 10 years than where I was then.
And you've got married again, I understand.
I did. I got married again. I've got a 4-year-old little boy with my husband, and we share girls. My daughter's 16 and my stepdaughter's 14.
Ashley Smith, thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you so much.